much for telling me that. Thank you. So this is our guest, David. Would you please go ahead and take over?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Annyeonghaseyo. Did I say that correctly? Perfect. Okay, I have one more. I've been practicing. Choye Domen David Enima. My name is David.
저는 David입니다.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brennan, for having me as a guest speaker today. I'm delighted to be with you. I thought I would start off by telling you a little bit of my background. I live in New York City, in the United States. I have been part of the hospitality industry for the last 30 years. The first 12 years of my career, I was a part-time event planner and a special projects coordinator. Back then, there was really no such job as an event planner. If there was a small listing in a newspaper advertising someone who had some event knowledge. That certainly has changed and developed over the years. Meeting and event planning has become not only a bona fide profession, it literally is makes such an impact on our global economies. And as we've experienced in the worldwide pandemic, it's become even more to the fore than ever before. So my careers were mostly in not-for-profit associations. There were large exhibit components to the meetings that I planned. And so I became very immersed in the buyer and supplier community and exchanges. I decided about halfway into my second decade that I wanted to be more of a salesperson than I wanted to be an event planner. So I've spent a bulk of my career as a hotelier, working for global sales offices for both Hilton Hotels and for Hyatt Hotels. I've also worked for a convention and tourism bureau as well in the city of Long Beach, California. And so I have a very wide background of being on just about every side of the hospitality business. So with 30 years of experience, I have lots and lots of stories, and I'm happy to answer questions or address anything that you'd like me to address. So just touching base on what I really believe in order to be successful in the hospitality business, you need to have a network of people. And one of the things that I've done consistently, no matter who I've worked for or where I've worked, is I volunteered on industry committees. And I'm going to talk about some of them, but it doesn't really matter to what extent you volunteer. Volunteering is so critical. I can't emphasize that enough. Some of the fringe benefits from volunteering is that you do get to test drive certain tasks to see whether you like them or not. And you also get to meet people that you are choosing to work with. And oftentimes I found that volunteer positions lead to paid positions because people get to experience your work. You get to learn different work styles, and you get to learn those work styles at your own pace. Any questions about that or comments? Okay, awesome. So I'm going to talk about what the industry was like pre-COVID, what the landscape was like. So if you were a hotel salesperson, you were looking at first making sure that hotels' guest rooms were filled 100%, that the ballrooms were filled with activities 100%. That was the first goal. The second goal was to make sure that the hotel rooms and the ballrooms were all occupied and getting the best possible rate for the space. And so you heard a lot about the game of rates, dates, and space. Well, that was certainly true pre-COVID. You know, hotels are in business to maximize the occupancy and the revenue, but rates and dates and space are all fluid, meaning that once you have a certain date, that date may be worth something very different from another date later on in the calendar year, depending on whether it's a weekend, weekday, holiday, non-holiday, what type of property you're talking about, downtown properties, resorts, airport properties, suburban properties. The whole marketing mix comes into play. Most hotels will have various channels, which are called mix of sales. So there's a wholesale channel. There are various retail channels, business travel, group rates that were varying depending on the size of the groups and the budgets and when those groups were booked. Everything has changed in the pandemic. Absolutely everything. And the same holds true on the event side. Events are looked at very, very differently. And what's emerged on the event side, and this comes as no news to all of you, would be the emergence of the virtual meeting. Because when hotels could no longer house people for meetings or guest rooms on the business travel side even, everyone had to look at how meetings were going to take place, and event planners became event producers of some sort. This is a component that we have learned in the pandemic that will not be going away. In fact, it's going to be growing. If you look at what happened in the sports world, sports events have been hybrid for a very long time. They are televised, and then there's the live component. Most of the people are watching the sporting events on a television set. They're not there. So you actually have two audiences that are looking at two entirely different guest experiences. Make sense? So the same thing is going to hold true for meetings of the future. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we move on. So as I was saying, I was on the hotel side for many years. My last position was as a global sales director for Hyatt Hotels and Resorts. And I managed about 50 large financial and insurance accounts. And I was responsible for knowing everything there was to know about these accounts. I was to know their business. I was to know the aggregate of all of their events. And I was also to know the key meeting planners as well as the key business heads that were responsible for making the decisions. I'm simplifying it. It was no simple job. These were very large companies that were corporations where decisions sometimes were made very quickly, other times decisions were made very slowly. But the name of the game was capturing as much market share for my hotel brand as possible, because there are a lot of metrics out there on the market. So for example, you're looking at reports that are published by Smith Travel Research, which detail which brands are leading and which brands are lagging. And there are a whole bunch of other reports. And rather than get into a lot of data to bore you to death, just know that there are people who are involved in sales analytics, and there are people who are involved in sales. Salespeople are going for the accomplishments. They're not looking for how they're measured, because in a lot of cases, if it's not a pure number, you can slice and dice numbers any which way you would like to slice them to make yourself look as good as possible. So my position at Hyatt Hotels was eliminated in the pandemic. And in 2020, I will tell you that I was one of the leaders of the year. So I was celebrated on stage in January of 2020. And that was about the time that COVID-19 had already hit over in Asia. And there were rumblings about things going on in Asia, but frankly, at that time, we really weren't paying attention to them. In fact, we weren't paying attention to what was happening until about early March, when all of a sudden the bottom fell out and nobody really knew where it was coming. I mean, it was really something to, it was something to behold. So it just happened, and cancellations were fast and furious. There was no controlling it, and 1,300 of us were let go at the same time in my company alone. So I never took it personally. I knew that it wasn't performance related, certainly. It was just related to the pandemic. Excuse me. So what I've done since is I formed my own speaker management company. And so I had what I called transferable skills. I had a customer base, and I also had certain sales skills that now I was just selling a different product to the same audience. And so now I represent people, talent that is being used at these meetings in a virtual setting rather than a live setting. Now I'm going to talk about recovery, which is going to make everybody smile. But I just wanted to set the table in terms of what this looked like and what my experience was like. I will also add that being in New York City, we had about 25% of the cases back in March. So this was a very real scenario for me. This was not something that was abstract, that I was just hearing about the same way that I was hearing about things happening in Asia back in January. So I got it right away and knew that I needed to make some changes. And I always say that changes happen for us, not to us. You have to have a mindset that change is inevitable, and no matter what we do, change is going to happen. So back in 2020, I just want to say the pandemic has changed the global industry forever. That's a fact. 2020, yes, question. You're on mute, Dr. Brennan.
Sorry, I'm seeing personal messages. Someone said, "Oh, I like your background." So I started laughing. Sorry. If you guys know what the background is, you're a little bit young for it, but do you know what that is? David, you must know the background.
Yeah, sure. So it's a sign that says, "Keep calm."
Oh, no, I'm sorry. My virtual background for the Friends, the TV show Friends.
Oh.
So
you answer the question.
The question for you.
Oh, the Central Perk. It was part of a television show.
Central Perk.
I'm sorry, I was a little late on that one.
So that's why I was laughing. One of the students said, "Oh, I like your background," but they have a question for you. They wanted to know from your experience, what were some of the hardships that planners are facing during the COVID time, the COVID period? What are some of the hardships that, like, how they're doing their job? How are there mass layoffs? Are they still doing well? And the second question was, what changes will happen when the hospitality industry, when COVID finally is under control or disappears? So it's kind of like now is the kind of the peak of the COVID, but once maybe next year or so, when COVID is not an issue anymore, how do you see the industry going?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that question. So I want to say that 2020 was definitely a year of extreme business disruption. 2021 is looking like a year of business continuance and recovery. Mm-hmm. And the next year is looking like a year of business resurgence. There's a lot of pent-up demand. So I'm just going to simplify it by saying big interruption, normalizing and stabilizing, and then resurging. Mm-hmm. So to answer the first part of that question, meeting planners had to completely change their roles from event planners to event producers. They had to learn every type of online platform there was that they could hold their virtual meetings on. In the case of financial and insurance planners, they also had to be extra concerned about compliance and security because there was a lot of sensitive data that was discussed on those meetings. So in terms of job interruption, everything changed with meeting planners. That's for sure. And a
David,
lot of, yes,
I'm sorry, David, do you think that all of those changes, are they here to stay? Or is there going back to the way things were before, or is it going to be that new normal for the industry?
I do think that it is going to be part of the new normal because there's going to be a certain percentage of the population in any organization that cannot or will not travel.
Yep.
We have learned a lot in this pandemic about what we can tolerate and what we are able to do. And there's the economic piece of it too, where people are looking to save money because they're saying, gee, I can stay in my living room and I'm not commuting anywhere and I can get certain things done. But I do believe that there are certain meetings that are going to require people to meet face to face. So for example, incentive programs where, let's just say I win an award. Well, you know what? If you send me a bottle of champagne or you send me a steak dinner to my home and have me eat it while we're all here on the screen, it's not going to be as fun as me meeting with all of you. I don't get to greet you the same way that I would greet you virtually. So I do think that there is a big component that is here to stay and those are just some of the reasons. And then in terms of what the future might hold, I do think that meetings are going to look differently. I think that there's going to be an emphasis on cleanliness and safety. And those are just a couple of things that I think. Food packaging, sustainability, there's a lot that's in the works right now. By the way, did you all know that today was Global Meetings Industry Day across the world? A lot of you are shaking your head yes. Some of you are shaking your head no. Well, I'm going to be talking about an organization shortly. It's called the Events Industry Council, where there's lots of information and lots of free recordings for you to listen to on any specific subject that I'm bringing up tonight. Dr. Brennan?
Yep.
Shall I? Any other questions?
No, sorry, I was taking some screenshots because I'm trying to get all of because it's 3 different screens for me. So I was just trying to get screenshots of the students. So yep.
Okay, I'm going to keep calm and I'm going to carry on then.
Yes, please do.
Okay, awesome. So I wanted to give you just an idea of how large this industry really is. 1.5 billion people have been affected by this. $2.5 trillion US dollars of direct or indirect spending comes out of the meetings and events and hospitality industry. In the US, out of that 2.5 trillion, 1.5 trillion contributes to the gross data product contribution. That's enormous. And 26 million people are in the hospitality business pre-COVID. That's a lot. So some of the things that I think are going to be here to stay, at least in the short term, I don't know how long it'll be. It all depends on the trajectory of the virus. Health passports. I mean, right now, a lot of people can't travel. We have to figure out how people are going to be able to travel and how they're going to be able to prove if they're healthy or not. And this is going to vary from location to location. And part of this is due to privacy concerns. Companies are not going to be in a position consistently to mandate health and to say, are you okay? But a lot of companies, part of the workaround is that they're offering incentives to people to go get vaccinated, such as paid time or time off. So health and wellness checks are going to play a big part in meetings of the future. Question?
Yes. So I think that from one of the questions they were saying, COVID-19 is probably is it going to change the way hotels run their business? Because I think that, like as you mentioned briefly about the new protocols when it comes to cleanliness and the guest expectations of a new type of clean, where it's, you know what I mean, like constantly disinfecting the places set around for disinfecting, the way that the hotels are cleaned, or even the types of like wearing masks, things like that. Do you think that's going to be something that stays, or is it a new focus?
Well, I think it's certainly going to stay in the short term. I mean, at least here in the States, there's social distancing, or as it's also called, physical distancing. And that's not only just for the attendees. Think about what's happening in what we call back of the house.
Yes.
The servers, the people who are preparing food, they can't have the kitchen crowded. There has to be physical distancing between the sous chefs and the people who are serving. And in terms of masks, I definitely think that I mean, that's part of personal protection equipment. I think hotels are always going to have some on supply, the same way that they have toothpaste available at the front desk. There are going to be some people who are just not going to be comfortable walking around without a mask.
Mhm.
In the short term, I definitely think that masks are going to stay, and I think in a lot of cases, gloves may as well.
One last question.
Oh,
When you were talking about occupancy rates, dates, and space, pre-COVID, I think the U.S. market was doing extremely well. But during COVID, can you say anything about like the rates, occupancy, where it was maybe the last few months, but where is it now? I think it's
sure.
recovered a lot. From what I hear, but I'm not sure.
I absolutely can. So generally speaking, in order for a hotel to break even, it needs to be at about 55%
Mhm.
occupied. 55 is more or less the number. Right after COVID hit in the States, the months of April and May were at 10%.
Wow.
They were super low, and they were projected to stay at 10% for another couple of months after that. And for
Mhm.
most of 2020, the occupancy rates were certainly well below 50%. So hotels really took a bath in the
Mhm.
US, and I think in most parts of the world as well. So in Europe, Europe is certainly not doing well. I'm sure you all know what's going on there with the coronavirus. And in parts of Latin America, certainly the countries of Brazil are not doing well. And this has to do with vaccinations. Now, my understanding is that in South Korea, vaccinations are at about 30%.
Oh, it's much
Is
lower.
that true? It's much
Yeah.
lower.
They,
Right.
they,
So
they
South
just started.
Africa and
Yeah.
Japan and South Korea are very low. And right now, the US is really high. We're looking at, approaching 70%.
Mhm.
Our new president, Joe Biden, had promised 1 million vaccines, and he's now, or 10 million, and now it's up to 20 million. I mean, it's going through the roof. I'm not sure those numbers are quotable, so I'm going
Yeah.
to just say that it's almost doubling.
Yeah. I think just recently I saw that it was up to almost 4 million people are being vaccinated daily, like 3 million to 4 million per day.
Right.
Which,
That's why I said 10 and 20. Yeah.
yeah. So I think almost more than a third of Americans have had their first shot. It's more than a third. So they're way ahead of their 100-day schedule. But in Korea, we're behind. I'm not sure about other countries in Asia, but our daily infection rate is only 500-600 per day for 50 million
Mhm.
people. So it still is quite low comparatively, but vaccination rates are kind of lagging behind the United States.
Right. And so then again, to answer the other part of your questions with hotel occupancies, there are three buckets I'd like to talk about: leisure, business travel, and group. So leisure business, people can make their own decisions when they can, if they want to travel or not. So leisure business in the United States, particularly vacation spots, resorts and such, certain areas are close to 90%. They're close to surpassing pre-COVID levels
Mm.
because they have the discretionary spend and they've been cooped up for a year, so they want to travel. The other thing, the silver lining, is that in COVID, there was no place to go. So people weren't spending money, they were saving money. And now they have the money to go places because they weren't able to go anywhere in 2020. So a lot of this is what I call pent up demand. And people are going to say, okay, well, we couldn't take a family vacation in 2020. Where are we going to go for 2021? And now we're actually finding that there are problems with people finding places to go vacation on holiday because everybody's going for, wants to go to the same places. So business travel is going to be interesting. The reason I say that is because companies are not going to be able to mandate business travel the way that they were pre-COVID. So that is going to, and most American corporations have not lifted their travel bans yet.
Right.
And if they haven't lifted their travel bans, that means that they're not going to be sending their employees to meetings and events.
But isn't that going to be more, we're talking about domestic travel within the United States compared to international travel?
Well, it could be a little bit of both, Professor Brennan, because let's just take the travel restrictions aside. If a company hasn't lifted their travel bans, what they're essentially saying is that unless it is absolutely critical for me to travel from where I live to where you live, Professor Brennan, then I'm not going to say, okay, well, it's critical for you to go to a meeting or a convention. So until travel bans are lifted, that's going to determine when meetings and events are going to happen. So business travel is certainly going to be the barometer that we're watching in the corporate and association space.
Yes, especially for the students, because within the domestic market of travel is completely fine within like Korea, but in the United States, every state sets their own policy, so it makes it difficult because some states allow travel, some are not. So there's going to be many conflicting different state regulations.
Yes, and I'll take it one step further. Even within the states, the counties are different from county to county. So they have different number of people that can be in any particular venue. And then there are all sorts of other meeting related restrictions. So it's not just state by state, it's also county by county in a lot of cases. It's very, very confusing. There is a website, Meetings Mean Business, and it's only for US, but it will list at what's called under their COVID-19 tab. There will be a meeting and event tracker, which you can look up to see who's restricted and what those restrictions are.
Do you see, have you heard anything about the travel, the vaccination passports or the vaccination cards? Because I know that's an issue nowadays.
Today on Global Meetings Industry Day, this was a very hot topic. And the answer to this is that it is too early to tell what those standards are going to be because it's inconsistent as to whether or not companies can mandate vaccinations, and most cannot. And the reason they can't is they're citing privacy issues. So what's being talked about, Professor Brennan, are these contact tracing and how often one can take temperatures in and out of a venue. And one of the areas that we're neglecting to talk about are all of these offices that have been closed during the pandemic. So people are now returning to work. And in the US, we're looking at around September, but it's not going to be, okay, all clear, everybody back to work. Offices are going to be reconfigured for social distancing requirements. Masking will probably be taking place. And a lot of buildings are going to require temperature checks, because the companies don't necessarily own these large buildings in American cities. They lease floors. So it's not going to be up to them. It's going to be up to the managing company of the building in which they're domiciled.
Yep.
So it's very complicated. But everywhere you go, it's almost pretty ubiquitous to see temperature checks everywhere.
David, there's another question from one of the students.
Yeah.
She would like to know, what is your advice to any new businesses that are starting within this environment? Is there any specific advice you would give to maybe a startup that was trying to start up during this type of period?
Any type of, you mean small business?
Smaller business, yeah. If they were like trying to start a small business, was there any type of advice that you would give?
Okay, well, I'm gonna give that advice to myself because I started a small business.
Perfect.
So I opened up my own speaker management company, and I did my research, and I saw a need in the marketplace for this. And not only did I ask customers if they would buy from me, I looked at the type of people that they were buying from. So my advice would be, do your homework, do your homework, do your homework.
Yeah. No,
You have to do your research. You know, I think that anybody who wants to start a business and you see an opportunity, list out the risks as well as the rewards, because I think, and maybe this is too cliche to say, I think it's great to build castles in the air as long as you have a foundation underneath them to land. So that would be my advice. I think it's wonderful. And I will add that I think that we are entering a freelance economy, particularly when it comes to hospitality. Many, many, many people have left this business, either temporarily or permanently. Some have gone into other businesses like real estate and insurance. Other people have gone and opened their own businesses. I decided for myself, I've been in this business for 30 years. While I can return once the market comes back, I don't want to wait necessarily 2.5, 3.5, 4 years for the industry to fully recover. And that's probably what it's going to take. This was probably the hardest hit we've ever seen this industry hit in our lifetimes. Let's hope it's the last, but we don't know what we don't know. So everything is a risk, but at the end of the day, you really need to do your homework. I can't emphasize that enough.
Just in the conversation I had with Colleen yesterday, she said that a lot of the venues are having difficulties to hire people because a lot of the big areas or the big companies that had a lot of staff that let a lot go, they moved out of the area to take other jobs. And then now they're actually having a harder time to restaff basically a lot of the properties.
That is true. And it's also true for businesses who are looking for their people to return back to their offices. A lot of people moved out of state, figuring, well, if I'm working remote, and let's say I'm living in, and I'm making this up purely, everybody, full disclosure, let's just say I lived in the state of California, which was very restrictive, and I don't want to live in a restrictive state, and I want to move in with my family that lives in Texas, a less restrictive state. How now all of a sudden I'm having to like move back just to show up to a cubicle that I may not even have to myself. It may be a shared space, because a lot of offices are going from, this is no longer Dr. Brennan's desk. Dr. Brennan gets to use this desk on Monday and Wednesday, and David Rieterman gets to use this desk on Tuesday and Thursday, and Friday it's going to be for the visitor of the week, as an example. So everything's changed.
Aka, I don't speak Russian. Is that Russian? Well, sorry, there was a David, you'll get a kick out of this. One of the questions was written in Aka. What did you write that in? It looks like Russian Cyrillic.
I sent the wrong question.
So you're sending somebody else a question? Okay. I was wondering, I was like, well, I can't speak Uzbek, so I'm really sorry that I can't answer that question. The question was, David mentioned about a website or somewhere where we can listen to recordings on the topics related to the industry. This is about, you said yesterday.
Yes.
Can you please share, either can you type in the chat, the group chat?
I can. Yep, I'm going to do it right now.
Website so the students can also access those recordings. So are there any follow-up questions that you'd like to ask? We've already kept David over eventscouncil.org. Perfect.
Right, and it's called, that's the name of the organization. I do want to talk about that for a few minutes because it's a really important resource. So the Events Industry Council is really a global organization, and it has some wonderful information on it. And I strongly, strongly urge all of you to look at it. The Events Industry Council, its focus is on advocacy, research, professional recognition, and standards. Industry insights. It's chock-a-block full of information. One of the latest things on the EIC site is an economic significance study. It was just launched on March 16th, and it's global, okay? It covers economic impact. It covers a whole story about the losses in 2020. You've got to read it. It's really important for anybody in this industry. If you heard nothing else from me tonight, I want you to hear that. Also on the EIC site, there's accepted practices exchange, and there's a glossary of terms of everything you can imagine in the hospitality industry, and it is free. It's like reading the Webster's Dictionary. So there will be terms like gamification. If you don't know what gamification is, you should. It's about attendee engagement and keeping people engaged through games. Just as a small example. Guidance, reference tools. There's a risk management guidebook there. Information on virtual hybrid meetings. You can't go wrong. So just really wanted to talk about that for a minute. Also on the EIC website, there's information about digital design, diversity, equity, and inclusion, sustainability. The 2021 buzzword, people, is upskilling and reskilling. You know, there's a lot of that going on in our business, and event design. Any questions?
Yes, yes. One of the questions is, what kind of advice could you give to people who are just starting out, maybe next year or the year after, into the hospitality industry? Any type of advice for like getting a job, or what sectors of the industry will be like a hot place that'll be looking to hire a lot of people maybe next year or the year after?
What kind of advice can I give people who?
Yeah, so like, for example, you think that the hotel industry, meeting planners, et cetera, what would be like in demand maybe next year or the year after when you see the recovery in the industry?
Perfect question. Now I get it. If you aren't proficient in digital marketing or something in the tech area, you need to be proficient in that. There are lots of certificate programs for being a digital event specialist, if that's the side of the business you want to be on, because hybrid meetings are not going away.
Right.
No, that's a big one.
No, I think, as you said, like the industry probably from next year is already in recovery and is going to be continued to recover. So I think it's going to be a really good market for young people to get back into the hospitality industry, especially when most of the students here will be graduating probably next year or the year after for the hospitality program.
Yeah, there will be. And I think the thing to keep in the forefront of everybody's minds is that even if the hospitality industry takes another hit, the skills that you learn in the hospitality business, you have transferable skills. People skills never go out of style. They're transferable in anything that you do. And there's a lot of technology that's involved in the hospitality industry, and those skills are always going to be in style.
I think that's sage advice. I always think people skills, especially in the hospitality industry, and connecting well with people and taking care of your guests. I think that's you can't go wrong in any industry having those skills. And
Right.
any last words that you'd like to impart?
I would love to. So just some final thoughts for all of you. So we definitely are in a freelance economy. I think follow your dreams, do whatever it is that you feel you would like to do, because when you're doing what you like to do, the money does follow, and don't chase success. Success will follow you. It's important to stay relevant. Stay on social media. I'm going to put my information in the chat box if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, or if you have any other questions, I'm always happy to answer them. I think one of the most important things in hospitality is you need to be a friend first. You can't be out there asking for things. You need to, build relationships. This is a relationship business. Digital certification, really, really critical. And then I'll just give you a few things, just to think about. When you think you're off route, just make sure that you get back on route, use your network, join any number of industry organizations, volunteer, whether it's an hour or two, or even if it's not within the industry, just build your network, stay on LinkedIn and some other things. Mm-hmm.
I have a very relevant question from one of the students. They said that in Korea, it's a little bit difficult to get a good internship opportunity. Do you think that there's good internship opportunities for foreign students or Korean students going to the United States? Or is there any suggestions that you could say for where they can look for good opportunities for doing an internship?
Well, if it's in the hotel business, I mean, certainly, having worked for Hyatt, Hyatt may, or any of the other hotel chains may be looking for interns, because talent has been so challenging. As we mentioned earlier, the pandemic has created a lot of opportunities that didn't exist pre-COVID. So I think anything is possible in this economy. I don't have the exact answer to that, but if I'm uncertain about something, my biggest skill is that I'm curious. I ask a lot of questions.
No, and I think that David has been very generous to be able to say that he's happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. So if you don't have a LinkedIn account, you should, because it's a great way to network when you're looking for opportunities for is it for an internship, or for maybe we're looking for people who have industry experience, etc. And also you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I also use it. Before we go, what we'd like to do, everybody take your mouse, move down to the bottom where it says reaction. Can everybody click on a reaction? I want to do a screenshot so it has your face and a reaction down there. So please click on a reaction. It could be any reaction that you like. There we go. I see some reactions. Please make a reaction on. I see 1, 2, 3. Okay. Oh, hold on. There we go.
Everybody do it on the same time. So you got to
do it at the same time, because it only lasts for a few seconds. So
right. So you tell us when, and then we'll do it.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Reaction. Okay. Oh, perfect. There we go. Oh, sorry, I had my chat box open, so the screen got small.
Oh, do you want to do it again?
Sorry, one more time, everybody. So 1, 2, 3, reaction. There we go. Sorry, I got to do a quick screenshot. Oh, okay, perfect. There we go. Hold on, let me save that. I know I've been teaching using Zoom for 3 semesters, but still we're still trying to master all of the new little technologies. Personally, and I'd like to say for the class and for the visiting students here, really heartfelt thank you for taking your time to be able to come and give a guest lecture for us.
And if I say 감사합니다.
Chamaneo, yes. So everybody, thank you very much. Everybody, please take care. And then we're going to conclude the first guest lecture. And thank you very much, David, for setting the bar nice and high for our guest lecturers.
Thank you. It's been my honor and my pleasure. Good luck to everyone. My information's in the chat box.
Okay, everybody.
Thank you very
Have
much.
a good day. Thank you. Thanks, Professor.
I will upload this video onto YouTube, and I will share the link in my Kakao group chats. And if students not in my class, I can give it to the other professors that you're in the class with, and they can share the link with you if you want to review. So thank you, everybody. Keep safe. Thank you, David.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Professor.
David.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
David.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.